Hello and welcome to Spencer's Library. I'm Claudia and this is the return of me, but more importantly, the return of Jane Austen July. Yes, this is the 5th time that Jane Austen July is happening here on BookTube, the 4th time that I'm participating, and the 2nd time that I am hosting this with, of course, the 2 founders of Jane Austen July, Marissa from Blatantly Bookish and Katie from Books and Things. I will link both of their announcement videos in the description box. Check out the description box, there will be loads of links there, loads of timestamps, because I predict that this video is gonna get a little messy. If this is the first time you're hearing about Jane Austen July, let me just quickly explain what it is and what you can expect from it. Jane Austen July runs from the 1st of July to the 31st of July, and it's a month of celebrating Jane Austen and her writing. The easiest way to participate in Jane Austen July is to simply read one of Jane Austen's 6 novels, and I will introduce those in a moment. But if you want to get a little more involved than that, there are also challenges that you can have a look at and fulfill. Now, the challenges of Jane Austen July have always been the same across the years because there is just so much literature to pick from. But this year, one challenge is going to get a little upgrade, a little expansion, a little DLC, if you know what I mean. The first challenge, and as I've said, the only one you have to actually fulfill to participate in Jane Austen July, is to read one of Jane Austen's 6 main novels. And here they are in order of publication. There is Sense and Sensibility. This one is about 2 very different sisters who move to the countryside and get their hearts broken. Read this if you like cottagecore, underwhelming male love interests, and head versus heart debates. Or you could read Pride and Prejudice, in which an obstinate, headstrong girl meets a repressed millionaire. Do you like banter? Do you like bickering? Do you like embarrassing family members at parties? If you do, this might be the one for you. You could read Mansfield Park, in which a shy girl grows up with rich relatives. Do you like Cinderella stories? Quiet protagonists? First cousin marriages? Well, this might be the one for you. Or you could read Emma, in which a entitled rich girl learns a lesson in humility. You might want to pick this one if you like redemption stories, misunderstandings, and village hierarchies. Northanger Abbey is about an innocent teenage girl on her first big holiday to Party Central of the UK. That's Bath, not Liverpool. You'll love this one if you like reading about book nerds with an overactive imagination and backstabbing best friends. And finally, there's Persuasion, in which a woman goes through a quarter-life crisis and meets an ex who has annoyingly become both hot and rich. You'll enjoy this one if you like reading about aging into your late 20s, heartache and second chances. You can pick any of these books to read during Jane Austen July, and or you could participate in the 2 group reads that we do every year. We always rotate through the books, and this year the group reads are Pride and Prejudice for the first 2 weeks of July and Lady Susan in the 3rd week of July. Lady Susan is not one of Jane Austen's main 6 novels, but it is her epistolary novella about a chaotic, flirtatious, hilarious widow. Let's move on to challenge number 2, and that is to read a work by Jane Austen that's not one of the main 6 novels that I have just introduced. So you could, for example, read the aforementioned Lady Susan. I read it last year. It's absolutely hilarious. It's a very quick read, and I'm definitely going to participate in the group read, which, as I said, happens in the 3rd week of July. If you don't fancy reading that, you could, for example, read Jane Austen's unfinished novel, Sanditon. I haven't read this one myself, so I can't tell you anything about it, but lots of people love it. You could read Jane Austen's Letters, which I also did recently, and they were surprisingly interesting in a very mundane sort of a way. If you want a little slice of Regency life, then I can recommend reading her Letters, especially if you find a version that's well annotated. You could read Jane Austen's Juvenilia. I know lots of Austen fans really love the work that she wrote as a young woman and as a girl even. Again, I haven't read any of it, so I can't recommend anything in particular, but do have a look. There's various editions and collections of her Juvenilia out there. The 3rd challenge is to read a non-fiction work about Jane Austen or about her time. Now, there's loads of various biographies of Jane Austen out there. none of which I've read. I'm not a huge reader of memoir and biography, so I can't, again, give you specific recommendations, but do check out the other two hosts' announcement videos because I'm sure they will have some specific recommendations for Jane Austen biographies. But there are loads of other non-fiction books about Jane Austen, her work or her time. Last year I read a book called The Time Traveller's Guide to Regency Britain by Ian Mortimer, which is a fascinating read, but not without its fault. I will link my review of that book in the description box if you're interested. Another really popular one is by John Mullen. He wrote a book called What Matters in Jane Austen. Also a really fun read. Only read this one if you have already read Jane Austen's books because there's loads of spoilers in this book. He analyzes certain details and aspects of Jane Austen's novels that you might not notice on first reading them. Another author who has written some fascinating books about Jane Austen's time is the historian Amanda Vickery. Her books are a little more academic in nature, but still very readable. I can recommend Behind Closed Doors at Home in Georgian England, or you could also find her many journal articles and academic research on the Georgian period and the Regency. And of course I have to mention BookTube's favourite historian, who's Lucy Worsley. She has done a myriad of documentaries, mostly on the BBC, about Jane Austen and also loads of other time periods. And she has published some books about the time period as well, such as Jane Austen at Home, which I haven't read myself, but knowing her other work, I'm certain it's worth a read. The fourth challenge is to read a retelling of a Jane Austen book, or, and this is new this year, to read a work of historical fiction that's set in Jane Austen's time. So let me break this down into the 3 types of books you can read for this challenge. A retelling is a work of fiction that takes one of Jane Austen's stories as inspiration. This could, for example, be a story that's set in the modern age, but that is inspired by Jane Austen novels. Famous examples of that include Bridget Jones's Diary by... should have written this down. Helen? Hey Google, who wrote Bridget Jones's Diary?
Bridget Jones's Diary story was written by Helen Fielding.
Helen Fielding. So you could, for example, read Bridget Jones's Diary by Helen Fielding, or you could read one of the many books that are much better than that. Another famous retelling, though that one's a film rather than a book, is Clueless, which is based on Jane Austen's Emma. So you get the idea. A story that takes Jane Austen's novels and transplants them into a different place or time period. Last year, for example, I read Where the Rhythm Takes You by Sarah Dass, which is a young adult retelling of Persuasion set in modern-day Tobago. The year before that, I read Ayesha at Last by Uzma Jalaluddin, which is a Pride and Prejudice retelling set in modern-day Canada. So there's loads of stories like that that take inspiration from Jane Austen and transplant it into the modern age. Then there is another type of retelling, which is what I consider a spin-off of Jane Austen's novels, or more precisely, I suppose you could call it fan fiction. These are stories that are set in the world of Jane Austen's books. They could be sequels, prequels, stories that happen parallel to the events of Jane Austen's novels and that tell stories of maybe characters or aspects of her books that aren't expanded upon in the original. Genuinely, if I say fan fiction, I think most of you understand what that type of retelling is about. Popular examples of those fan fiction type retellings include, for example, Longbourn by Joe Baker, which follows a maid in the Bennet's household. So it tells the below the stairs stories of the servants. There is another very popular one, but one that I haven't read, The Other Bennet Sister by Janice Hadlow. This one focuses on Mary Bennet. Or there is Charlotte by Helen Moffat, which tells the story of, can you guess? Charlotte Lucas from Pride and Prejudice. To be completely honest, I have yet to read a book from that particular category that I truly enjoyed. And that's mostly because I can't help but compare these works to the originals, and they always fall short for me, not necessarily in style, but in characterization. There's just something about them that I find a little grating. However, I'm willing to give the fanfiction type of retelling another go, And this year, what I might do is I might actually just look at fanfiction online. I had a little look on AO3, and there are over 2,000 works of fanfiction just based on Pride and Prejudice alone. So I'm sure there's something there that I will enjoy. If you have any recommendations, put them in the comments. Please don't put any links in the comments, because YouTube is sure to filter them out. So if you know of a work of fanfiction, maybe you've written one yourself, just post like the title and where I can find it, and I'll do the search myself. So these are the retellings, but this year the hosts have decided to widen the fourth challenge to also include works of historical fiction set in Jane Austen's time. So these don't have to have anything at all to do with Jane Austen or with her works, though I'm sure there are some novels where Jane Austen herself appears as a character, but these are simply historical fiction set during Jane Austen's lifetime. And I had a little look at my Goodreads history and I thought, damn, I haven't read any books that fall into that category. I can't really recommend anything. But then I had an epiphany, I had a realization. This is gonna blow your mind. I'm really hyping this up now. It's not that spectacular. Listen. Much of Victorian fiction is actually set during the Georgian and Regency period. Think of your favourite Bronte, for example, Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights, both set during Jane Austen's lifetime. Your favourite Dickens, like Great Expectations, A Tale of Two Cities. Quite a lot of Victorian fiction, it turns out, is set a little earlier than the Victorian period. So if you fancy reading some Victorian fiction in Jane Austen July, it's not cheating. It does fulfill this particular challenge. However, there are of course many popular modern novels set during the Regency, especially from the romance genre. I would be amiss not to mention the hugely popular Bridgerton books by Julia Quinn, or if you want to go a little more classic, a little more 20th century, there are many novels by Georgette Heyer set in the Regency. She really popularized the Regency romance genre, one that I am not at all familiar with, but that I'm quite interested in dipping my toes into. So I am once again asking for your recommendations. Please tell me your favourite Regency romance novels or other historical fiction set in the Regency in the comments down below. The fifth challenge is to read a book by a contemporary of Jane Austen. The word contemporary seems to throw people sometimes, and I see this challenge misinterpreted quite a lot. So let me explain it another way. The challenge is to read a book written by an author who was alive at the same time as Jane Austen. This is one of my favourite challenges because we get to explore the time period of Jane Austen through the eyes of those who lived it with her. And there are some popular choices that we see pop up again and again. For example, Belinda by Maria Edgeworth, or any book by Maria Edgeworth. She has written other novels too. There's Marriage by Susan Ferrier. Any of Mary Shelley's novels, for example, Frankenstein, her most famous one. Or one of the many books by Walter Scott, all written around the same time that Jane Austen was writing her books. You could even go international and read some Goethe, for example. I might do that this year, let's see. But it doesn't have to be a work of fiction. You could read some non-fiction that was published during the time. For example, the early feminist manifesto, A Vindication of the Rights of Woman by Mary Wollstonecraft, who was Mary Shelley's mother. You could read Anne Lister's diaries for fellow fans of Gentleman Jack. Or you could read some poetry by the English Romantics, Wordsworth, Shelley, Byron. So there's plenty of choice here, and you don't have to limit yourself to novels in particular. I often read that people find it quite difficult to enjoy Regency fiction that's not Jane Austen's because they say that it's not as good as her novels. And I genuinely agree with that statement. But you can read other types of literature that's not also a novel. Truly loads of options for this challenge. The last two challenges are watching challenges rather than reading challenges. Challenge number 6 is to watch a direct screen adaptation of one of Jane Austen's works. And there is so much to choose from here. My opinions are super mainstream. My favourite adaptation is the 1995 Pride and Prejudice 6-part miniseries. My second favourite is the Emma miniseries from, I believe, 2008. Although I did watch Emma from 2020, last year I think. That's Emma with a completely unnecessary full stop in the title. And that was quite good as well. You know, I don't think I've watched a truly bad Jane Austen direct screen adaptation ever. So, actually let me backtrack. There is that adaptation of Mansfield Park with Billie Piper, which is genuinely atrocious. And I love Billie Piper. I think she's a fantastic actor. But I don't know what the hell ITV was thinking when they made that. Let's move swiftly on to the seventh and final challenge, which is to watch a modern screen adaptation of a work by Jane Austen. This is essentially the film version of the fourth reading challenge. So you could watch the aforementioned Clueless, or you could watch the Bridget Jones's Diary adaptation. Or you could watch something a little more adventurous, like for example the miniseries Lost in Austen from I think 2008, in which the protagonist is a Jane Austen superfan who gets trapped in Pride and Prejudice. Another fun one is Bride and Prejudice, which is a Bollywood-inspired Pride and Prejudice retelling. It's so early 2000s, it's wonderful. Fellow millennials, you're gonna love this one. There's adaptations of books, like for example Death Comes to Pemberley, which is a miniseries based on P.D. James's novel, which is a murder mystery fan fiction of Pride and Prejudice. There is Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, which is based on the novel by Seth Graham. I haven't read the book and I haven't seen the film, but I'm pretty sure it does what it says on the tin. It's Pride and Prejudice with zombies. So many different choices, so many different genres. I'm sure there's something there that you will enjoy. So, those were the challenges. This video is already getting quite long, so I'm going to stop it here. I am really looking forward to reading your comments on this, seeing your recommendations for those challenges that I am not super familiar with. Let me know if you're thinking of a TBR already, if you've already made some choices. I haven't yet. The TBR video you will see on this channel close to the end of the month. Do check out the description box, there will be loads of links there. Links to my previous Jane Austen July playlist, so you can see what sort of stuff normally happens during Jane Austen July, links to any books that I've mentioned, any reviews, and of course links to the channels of my two co-hosts, Marissa and Katie. Thank you for watching. Bye!